Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Well, today you can see on your screen, obviously, the capital of the United States of America. Some folks would call it the Ununited States of America at this point. Difficult to say. I do believe that we are becoming less and less united. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, that is happening. Now, yesterday we had the opportunity to watch the State of the Union address. Now, obviously, many folks are walking away from that State of the Union and looking at what transpired and looking at the response both during the speech and after the speech of the Democrat Party. We have to look at the response of the Democrat Party. I don't believe at one time during that entire speech did you observe any Democrats applaud or stand up or essentially do anything. It is now a complete and utter opposition party. And I would say at this point, the Democratic Party, the Democrats, are and have become essentially in opposition to the United States. In opposition to the United States. If you look at some of the actors now in Congress that have taken power in certain U.S. areas and certain U.S. states, you can actually see that. Now, I think it's important to look at both parties, right? If you look at the modern Republican Party, and then let's say go back to the 1970s, the 1980s, and then compare and contrast the Republican Party of the 1980s, of Ronald Reagan and of Nixon, to the Republican Party of now. Now, at the same time, let's compare and contrast the Democrat Party. Let's look at the Democrat Party now versus the Democrat Party that existed in the 1980s and the 1970s. Let's compare and contrast that. All right, so first let's start with the Republicans. What is different now in terms of its agenda? Of its agenda for the American people in the United States? What is different now than what existed, let's say, 20 years ago? There's not a lot. The Republican Party had always been strong on defense, low taxes, and personal rights. Pro-Second Amendment, pro-ability for an American citizen to own a firearm. What did the Democrat Party look like in the 70s and 80s? Well, if we go back to the 1970s to the 1980s, the Democratic Party looked a lot different, and its agenda was a lot different than it is now. And that's a very important concept to really get your head around. What is different? Is it the Republicans are different now than they were in the 70s? Or are the Democrats different now than they were in the 70s or 80s? And the answer to that, beyond a shadow of a doubt, is the Democrats are vastly different now than they were in the 70s or 80s. In the 70s or 80s, the Democrats were very much focused on not just civil rights, but working class Americans and their rights. I would argue, and I think most people would agree, that the 1970s and the 1980s variation of Democrats look very much different than the Democrats that exist now. Again, if you go back to Jimmy Carter and pre-Jimmy Carter, even within the realm of Slick Willie and Bill Clinton, right? Very much focused on old school democratic principles, which were very much focused on what was essentially workers' rights. Looking out for the quote-unquote small folk. Right? Now that has changed. That has changed very, very, very much so. So what is the focus now of the Democratic Party? You know, some folks will call it Democrat, some people Democratic Party, whatever. It's all semantics. It really doesn't matter. What are they focused on now? The modern Democratic Party is, from the perception of the average American right now, is focused on having the ability to open the borders of the United States. What does that mean? That means allowing anybody into the country. The position of the modern Democrat Party, if you were to ask any or most Democratic politicians, they would be in favor of complete and utter open borders. There are no borders. Not only that, you see a lot of Democrats now with this concept of stolen land. That the United States only exists because it exists based on thievery and taking land away from someone else. So a very radical position of a position that indicates self-destruction, meaning that if you believe that, if you truly believe that, if that's your basis of existence, and you exist in this country, and you are articulating that you only exist because you live on stolen land, well, what ultimately is the outcome? Where does that lead you? It doesn't take you to a good place. But again, my original point, if we look and compare and contrast Republican Party 20, 30 years ago to Republican Party now, not a lot has changed. Democratic Party, going back 20, 30 years ago to present day, a lot has changed. A lot has been adopted by the Democratic Party that indicates a shift from the values and its goals and objectives that existed 20, 30 years ago. So the fact is, the Democrats are radically changing. The Democrats are radically transforming. And in so, they are asking the American people, they are asking the American state, the United States, to transform along with it. So again, Republicans, freedom, liberty, personal property rights, the basics of the Constitution. The Democrats, essentially, as we speak, want to change that. They would like for the United States to go from a country that exists under a rule of law and a constitutional republic to one that becomes what is essentially a raw democracy. A democracy based on 51 out of 100 people saying, let's do this. Even if those 51 people are incorrect and are making a grievously bad decision, that is what the Democrats want to do. And if you look at exactly in terms of what their agenda is now, what is it? Unlimited open borders, illegal immigration, allowing illegal immigration to occur, and then allowing those individuals the right to vote. Why do they want that to happen? Because the Democrats believe under their system of government that if the majority of the population is reliant upon the Democratic Party, then the Democratic Party stays in power. And the only way to do that is to import poverty, is to import stupidity, and then have that as the new rule of law, the wisdom of crowds. So the Democrats moving from a constitutional republic to the wisdom of crowds. The Republicans, the modern Republican Party, compare and contrast again now versus 20, 30 years ago, based on a constitutional republic. Now, this is where it's going to get tricky. This is where it's going to get very interesting. This is where it could become very much a kinetic scenario. If the Democrats choose to go with the wisdom of crowds and to circumvent the election process with illegal aliens and those that do not have the constitutional right to vote, the Democrats want those individuals to have a say in the governing of the United States. The Constitution says they do not have that right. So again, do we accept the democratic wisdom of crowds in a perpetual evolution of government and governance? Or do we stick with a constitutional republic in which we can say, okay, even though that 51 people would like to institute Sharia law, the other 49 people do not want to go that route. Under the democratic way of governance, that could, and in all likelihood, will happen in certain areas of the United States. So again, if you ask the question, what has changed? Why are Americans at each other's throat right now? Which side is causing this to happen? And the answer is simple. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, it is the Democrat Party that is doing this. They are the ones that have changed, that have evolved into something completely different that existed in which they existed 20 to 30 years ago. If you look at Ilhan Omar and many of the other radicals that have ascended to power within the Democrat Party, that did not exist 20, 30 years ago. The most, I would say, radical Democrat who was not even a Democrat for much of his time in office was Sanders, right? And at the time he was an oddball. I mean, the guy is a devout socialist. He's an anti-capitalist. He traveled to the Soviet Union and celebrated his anniversary, his wedding anniversary in the Soviet Union. And again, he's considered a fairly moderate mainstream Democrat now. Again, if we go back 20, 30 years, Carter, he was an oddball. He was a radical. And now we have individuals that are far beyond even that level of radicalism in the Democratic Party. So it's the Democratic Party that has changed and has become what it is now. It is not the Republicans that have altered their persona, that have altered their ideology, that have altered what they desire for America. It is the Democrats that have done that. And that's where we're at today. And ultimately, America is going to have to make a decision. Even though, and I've talked about this before, about the hypothetical possibility of pausing what the Democrats believe in democracy. Right? Again, because it goes against the constitutional republic. If you import millions of illegal aliens and you say, oh, you can vote. Yeah, absolutely. Go to the voting polls. We want your vote because we know you're going to vote for whatever we dream up. You're going to have to fight against that because it goes against the constitutional republic. And that's what we are. And then not even to get into the other social issues that exist and that are being propagated by the Democrats. The whole concept of mutilating children and transvestites and everything else that goes along with that. I mean, it's just incredibly bizarre. And again, going back 20, 30, 40 years, that was something that the existing Democratic Party, it did not condone. Fast forward to where we're at now, it's something they very much believe in. It's as the president said last night, full of crazy people. And he's not being untruthful when he says that. Right now, the modern Democratic Party is full of crazy people. But at this point, it really doesn't matter because one side is going to have to win. And as I hearken back to a previous episode, might makes right. So at the end of the day, if there are 20 of us and there are 60 of them, and the 20 of us have better capability than those other 50 lunatics, what do? Well, the answer is simple. Might will make right. That does it for today. As always, thank you for joining us. More to come very soon. Good day.